Morning, folks. For those of you who it is
Hello.
for, welcome. Welcome. We'll give it a couple of minutes for everyone to join us and we'll get started very shortly. Didn't even get your name when you walked on by. But I heard you rise, so you well mine. Hoping you would stop so I could ask you these simple things like, do you love the ocean? And could you love the ocean with me? Oh, forgot Christy. Welcome, Christy. 'Cause I'll be yours. No. Couple more just joining us. 'Cause I'll be yours, my love. 'Cause I'll be yours. 'Cause Alrighty, folks. We will make a start. We've only got an hour together, so we want to make the most of our time. Diana's not Diana. It should be Rob. That's all right. You can be Diana for the next hour. Why not? Welcome all, and thank you for joining us for our SkillGym on challenging your design assumptions. My name's Matt. As always, I'll do a quick intro, share my screen, talk a little bit about what to expect over the next hour, and then you guys will have a chance to meet each other and have a quick chat to get you warmed up as well. So let me share my screen. And this SkillGym is about challenging your design assumptions. It's all about understanding the sort of unexamined beliefs that we might have about what a problem is, what's causing the problem, what's holding it in place, who's responsible for solving it, what the solution needs to be, all of these kinds of things that we sort of implicitly have assumptions about and often don't take the time to challenge those assumptions. And it can lead to suboptimal solutions when we're doing design and innovation work. So we want to explore some of the ways that we can try to question those assumptions and work out whether we're actually on the right track with our understanding of the problem and with our ideas about solutions as well. As I said, my name's Matt. I work for a company called Skills of the Modern Age. For those who are new to us, we're a design and innovation company. For the last 3 years, we've worked with over 8,000 learners across a whole different range of industries and backgrounds, but all of our work is focused on getting people ready to thrive in the future of work. So lots of different kinds of skill sets and topics. And our SkillGym series is a place for us to explore new ideas with you guys. It's less of an expert sharing information and more of someone who's interested in a topic sort of sharing a bit about what they've learnt and asking for your feedback and your thoughts as well. So you'll learn as much from each other and I'll learn from you as much as you'll learn from me in this session, hopefully. So I want to give you guys a chance, as I said, to get to know one another a little bit. And with Easter coming up, this was the question that I've decided to start you off with. When I say find out about the Easter Bunny, I don't want to burst anyone's bubble in this call here, but what I mean is finding out that the Easter Bunny may not have been what your parents told you it was as you were growing up. So do you remember what age you were and when you found out about the Easter Bunny scandal? And if you don't remember that one, a story about Father Christmas is totally fine as well. We want to pop you in some breakout rooms. You can share what's your name, what's the work that you're doing at the moment in brief format. And then when did you find out about the Easter Bunny and do you remember what the story was? Any questions before I open up these breakout rooms for you? No, we're all good. Awesome. All right. Opening these up now, and I'll see you soon. All right, everyone's jumping back in. There you all are. Awesome. All right. Hopefully we've heard some adorable childhood stories and all bonded a little bit over the Easter Bunny stories that you've just shared. The reason that I started you off with that question as your sort of icebreaker is to bring your mind to some of the things that make so much sense and that we can believe so wholeheartedly for so much of our lives, and then have them turn out to be completely false. So when we're talking about challenging our design assumptions, that's a sort of useful intro into this topic, because part of our role as innovators and as designers is to make sure that we're always challenging all of these beliefs, even sort of unspoken beliefs that we have about the problems that we're dealing with and about the solutions that we're coming up with, to make sure that those beliefs actually have some basis to them, and to make sure that we're on the right page and are delivering solutions that are actually going to work for the people that we're designing for. So if I share my screen again, this is this concept that finding these effective solutions requires us to be really brutally honest about the assumptions that we hold. And that requires first us trying to uncover what those assumptions might be, because the problem with assumptions, as we know, is that a lot of the time we don't know that we have them, or we don't know what they are. And so it makes it very tricky to sort of overturn those assumptions. So we're going to offer you a couple of tools today that will hopefully help you to get a little bit better at being self-aware and at understanding what your assumptions about the problem and about the solution might be, so that you can come up with these effective solutions. Some of the kinds of assumptions that we often have about our design processes are things like this. I know how people are feeling about this problem. I understand what the root cause is of the problem, or I assume that there is one root cause of the problem. I can identify the people or organizations who need to fix this, so who's responsible. I know what needs to be done to solve the problem. I know what impacts this solution idea would have in different areas of the problem or the system that we're working in. Or I can tell you how people will respond to my solution, whether they'll actually use it, whether they'll be delighted by this great idea that I know that I have for solving the problem. A lot of the time, it's got at the top of the screen there, even unwittingly, we believe these things. So we don't always necessarily, we're not always aware of the assumptions that we have in these design processes, but often, particularly as experts working through problem-solving processes, we've unwittingly or unconsciously got these assumptions or beliefs about the work that we're doing, and they can hold us back from coming up with really helpful solutions or powerful solutions. So across the workshop today, I'm going to invite you to work on a sort of a real world challenge with me. This is based on some data from Indeed, the sort of global jobs company, or a jobs board, if you like. And they found in a recent survey that only half of young Australian people believe that their education has adequately prepared them for the world of work. So it's a challenge in our education system, and we're going to use this as a bit of a testing ground to see if we can help. Imagine that we are working at a high school, where the leadership team of the high school, and we're trying to work out, from our perspective in a high school setting, what are we going to do about the fact that only half of the people who are graduating across the country feel that they've been adequately prepared for the world of work that's ahead of them? What can we do about that? What do we understand about the problem, and what can we do in terms of solutions? So firstly, we want to look at this idea about our assumptions about the problem itself. So your job as an innovator is to be super skeptical of your own ideas, your own assumptions about what the problem might be, and how the problem is arising as well. So the activity that we're going to start you off with, first individually and then in your group, is trying to identify what some of your assumptions might be, and then ask some what if questions. So very shortly, hopefully you've all brought along a bit of paper and something to write with. If not, you can probably do it just as easily on a Word document or something like that, or you're welcome to duck and grab yourself some paper as well. But I'm going to get you to draw a line down the middle of your paper. On one hand, on the one side, you're going to write down some of your assumptions. And these are going to be sentences with a full stop at the end of them. And then on the other side, you're going to flip those into some what if questions. So the example that I've got here is, teachers are responsible for their students' engagement and or disengagement, as it may be. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to say, all right, but what if I'm wrong? What if I believe the complete opposite of that? What if that was an assumption that was completely incorrect? What might the other solutions be, or what might the other assumptions that I could make be about who's responsible for student learning? So some of the examples might be, well, what if students had to take responsibility for their own learning, and it was a student engagement piece around them, taking that responsibility on a personal level. What if it was parents and guardians and the family environment playing a really key role? Or what if curriculum designers needed to allow for more flexibility? This is just a few other hypotheses that could be possible around who might be responsible for this element of student engagement or student learning. So the point of the exercise is to uncover what some of your assumptions might be already about what the problem might be, and then to flip those and start asking some what if questions about some of the other things that might be possible. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to have a list of sort of prompts for you. I want you to respond to those with the first thing off the top of your head. Try not to censor yourself too much. Try not to get into the mindset of challenging your assumptions straight away. I want you to sort of respond with the immediate thing that comes to your mind, your immediate assumption, and then give yourself a chance to start uncovering what about some of these what if questions? What about if I try to challenge that assumption a little bit? And to help you get started, I've got a list of prompts down the left-hand side as well. So what are your assumptions about how people are experiencing the problem, about the root cause, about who's responsible, about solutions to the problem, about what impact it will have, the solution will have, and about how the solution needs to be delivered, including funding and who's delivering it and what it would look like and all these sorts of things. So remembering that we're responding to the challenge of only half of young Australians feeling like they've been prepared by their education for the world of work. What is your assumptions about what's happening with this particular problem and what needs to be done about it? And then start to challenge some of your assumptions with these what if questions. Are there any questions about how this activity works? Anyone who's confused? Brooke, yeah, go for it. Do you want to come off mute and let me know if you've got a question?
Yeah, thanks. Are these adults looking back retrospectively, or are they students already at school who are?
I believe it's graduates, so it's people who are just going into the workforce.
Yep.
So graduate survey or job seeker survey, and people who feel like they haven't been prepared.
Okay, thanks.
Does that answer the question?
It does.
Awesome. All right, take it away. Working individually at first on your piece of paper, and then I'm going to send you out into some breakout rooms to share some of your insights and your thoughts with others and have a bit of a discussion around this one. So I'll pop on some music for you. Have a go at seeing if you can uncover and challenge some of your assumptions. All right, team, welcome back. Would love to hear some of what came out of those conversations. Did anyone want to share what the conversation was like in their group? And particularly, did you have similar assumptions that you'd made about the problem and about solutions? Or did you have quite different assumptions within your group that you chatted with? Who wants to jump in and share? Don't make me pick on someone.
We had a variety of things in our group. Sort of taking it from, I guess, the student's perspective around knowing what work they want to do. Not all kids know what work they want to do. So the education really being able to provide that context for everyone is quite challenging, and if children don't know what they want, or kids and young people. Another assumption might be that of those who do feel more prepared, which percentage of those had done some work experience through that training or that education piece?
Yeah.
And would that impact those numbers? The purpose of schooling is to prepare people for work, is an assumption.
Yeah.
i.e., is it more about life in general, or is it really should be focused directly on that work?
Yeah.
And so then on the flip, not on the flip side, but from an alternative perspective, It was more around, I guess, that government control over the curriculum and the red tape and policy, and really dictating what that curriculum might look like based on that. Potentially educators who might have lost touch with real life skills needed in workplaces, modern workplaces. So therefore, a disconnect there. And lack of government funding impacting the quality of courses, i.e. the ability for bringing in that real life, real world examples and things like that into courses, because they might be limited on funding.
Yeah, fantastic. So identified a range of different issues there. And I love that level of, you've got sort of the specifics of, do we have enough funding? Is it curriculum, issues, but all the way up to the really high level stuff of, well, what's the purpose of education in the first place? Are we making some erroneous assumptions right at the very beginning about why we're actually putting people through school at all, and what kind of results we want to see from schooling as a system? Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, Jenny. So we've first focused on some of our assumptions in general, and particularly around the problem that we're seeing. We now want to shift our attention a little bit more to assumptions about the solution. And in one of the key concepts that we want to leave you with from today is this idea that really effective solutions need to sit at the center of this sort of big Venn diagram of desirability, feasibility, and viability. So I'll talk a little bit about what each of those different things means. But what we're looking for is finding solutions that meet all three. And we have different sets of assumptions about whether our ideas for solutions are going to be desirable, feasible, and viable. And there are different ways of testing out whether those things are in fact true as well. So we'll work through each of those as well. So desirability is all about, do people actually want this thing? Is it something that the people that I'm designing for have actually asked for, or that meets a need for them? So you ask questions like, will people use it or pay for it? And does it solve a problem or achieve a goal for the end user that I'm actually designing for? The next set of questions is around feasibility. So is it something that I can actually deliver? Is it feasible to deliver this thing within the sort of budget and time frame that I might be working within? So do I have the resources, the capability, the time, the budget to deliver what it is that this solution says it can deliver? And finally, viability is all about whether it's worth doing. So is it actually creating value for the users, and is it creating value for the organization who's delivering the solution as well? So for example, the school that we might be designing on behalf of, they might be able to deliver something that's desirable to students. It might be feasible and they can deliver it, but it might not make any business sense for them to deliver a particular solution. So thinking about what outcomes will it achieve, and what evidence do we have about those outcomes? So how do we know if it's going to deliver those outcomes for us? One of the best ways that we can start to test these assumptions that we have about desirability, feasibility, and viability is by building prototypes of our ideas before we launch them as a sort of big scale approach to solving a problem. So a prototype is any kind of first draft, if you like, of an idea. It's an early sample or model or release of your product or your solution. And the key thing about these is that it's not just a sort of draft because you want to build the first version to show people what it looks like, and then you're going to build the second version and the big version anyway. It's all about building a prototype to test a particular assumption that you have about your idea. So when you're starting to build prototypes, you get into this cycle of building something, measuring the response that you get from it, and different metrics around your particular prototype. And this would depend a lot on what kind of prototype it is and what you're looking to test. Learning from those measurements and those metrics and working out what feedback you've gotten, whether that's strongly negative feedback and you might need to completely scrap it and build something different, or generally positive, but you might need to make some edits and sort of and change your idea for the next iteration, and then building the next thing based on what you've learnt. And this becomes this iterative cycle where you're almost always in a prototyping and testing cycle, because any product or solution or service that you're delivering should always be going through this, this cycle of let's measure how we're going with it, let's learn from those measurements, and then let's build the next version of it, iteratively improving on it each time. This is a quick example of what prototypes can look like. It's not as relevant to the education context that we're tackling with this challenge, but it's a really interesting example because it gives a great sense of building prototypes to test particular ideas and particular assumptions about your solution. So one prototype doesn't have to, and probably can never, test everything about your idea or your solution all at once. What you typically need to do is build a series of prototypes that test particular assumptions, and you need to start with the riskiest assumptions that you have about your idea. So the example here is a company called HumTech. They're a company out of Perth. I am not very good at describing their business or what they do, but essentially they've built a patch that stimulates your brain waves, and they've proven that it improves your working memory and your productivity in the short term. So as you can imagine, with a prototype or a product like that, the riskiest assumption that you have at the very beginning is going to be, can we prove that this science actually works, that this technology actually works, and that it does in fact improve working memory and productivity? So on the left-hand side there, you can see a big ugly circuit board that he's holding up against his head. It's not something that anyone would actually wear. It's not something that you could use in day-to-day life, because it's got all these cords attached to it and all the rest of it. But that shows an example of actually testing first. What's our riskiest assumption? Well, it's that we can actually make this technology work. Once they'd proven that and they got the science right, then the next risky assumption, or one of the next assumptions to test, was, will people actually wear this? Or the assumption is people will be able to wear this in the workplace and they won't feel too embarrassed to do it. And so that's where you can see on the right-hand side, they've started to develop the next prototype, which is fitting all of that technology into a band, which looks at least a little bit less silly than the great big circuit board on the left-hand side. And it's something that people might actually wear in the workplace and use in a sort of real-world context. So the point being here is that, as I said, you don't have to test everything about your idea with one prototype. What you'll need to do is work out, what's my riskiest assumption and what do I need to test first to make sure that I've validated that assumption, and then I can move on to maybe building the next prototype, which tests something else about my idea for a solution. So going back to our education context that we're working on together, imagine that this is the solution that's been proposed. As a team, as our leadership team at our school that we're running, we're considering a proposal to build an innovative new STEM centre at our school with facilities for robotics learning, 3D printing, and more. So there's a big focus on technologies that kids can learn. We know that STEM is going to be a big area for employment in the future of work. And so we're thinking about building this big new expensive STEM centre at our school with facilities for kids at our school to do this kind of technology and science-based learning. What we're going to do is start to work out, what are some of the riskiest assumptions that we have about this proposed idea, and what are the kinds of prototypes that we could start to build to test or validate those assumptions. So we've got assumptions around a range of different factors here. It might be about our budget, might be about timelines, about the kind of stakeholders that need to be involved, about technology and the benefits, about whether kids will actually use it or enjoy using the STEM centre. Lots of different kinds of assumptions here, and about whether STEM is the right sort of category to be focusing on. All kinds of things you can imagine are the key assumptions that we're making about this solution. What we need to do is work out, how can we actually start to build some prototypes and test or validate whether those assumptions are correct or not. So to do that, I'm going to send you through a link to a canvas that is going to be helping you to identify what some of those risky assumptions are and what are the prototypes that we can start to build to validate those assumptions. So let me pop in the chat for you. If I can get access to the chat, bear with me. All right. Into the chat now, I'm going to be putting an editable canvas. So you can download that one and type your answers straight into the canvas. Or if you feel more comfortable, you're more than welcome to work on the pen and paper that you've got with you as well, and just sort of divide the page again into assumptions on the left-hand side and then prototypes to validate those assumptions on the right. But I'm going to give you a chance, again, working individually first, and then jumping into your groups to share with your team. What are some of the riskiest assumptions that we might have if we were thinking about this proposal to build a big STEM center at our school to improve our readiness, our work readiness of our graduates? And what are some of the prototypes that we can start to build or make our idea tangible in some way so that we can actually test and validate those assumptions to work out whether we're on the right track with this idea for a solution? Does that make sense? Are there any questions about the exercise? Awesome. Sounds like you're onto it. Let me know if there are any questions. Feel free to pop your hand up or just jump off mute and let me know. I'll pop on some music and give you guys some time to work on this individually, and then you'll have a chance to share in your groups. Take it away. All right. There you all are. Welcome back. We've now thoroughly tested our assumptions about our big STEM center solution. I would love to hear some of your thoughts. What do you think were probably in your groups the biggest assumption that you agreed on, and some of the ideas you had for prototyping and to test or validate that particular assumption? Did anyone have a prototype idea that really stood out for them? Someone other than Jenny this time.
I'll go.
Thanks, Mary.
One of the assumptions that we talked about was that by building this center, new STEM center plus robotics and all that involved, that it will meet the needs of the 47%, right? The other half that are saying that they're not prepared, and that we obviously the budget and all. So we did talk about very, very briefly towards the end how to validate this. We need to understand more of why they didn't feel that they were prepared, because at the moment we're building something. Well, we're coming up with a solution. We don't know the reason why they failed to be, or they without the understanding. So it's a bit hard to say, okay, this is a solution when we don't actually have a good understanding of the root cause.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing to do might be to sort of actually have conversations with the students and understand a little bit more about what's going on for them.
That's right.
Students and maybe alumni and past graduates as well.
Yeah, exactly. The other 40%, 47% to understand what the reason was.
Yeah, brilliant. Did anyone else have different ideas that came up in their groups that they thought might be helpful?
Maybe similarly, like we had a bit of a discussion about whether the technologies that we've selected for this center will be relevant by the time it's built. Or, you know, so and do we want our students to be learning very specific skills to do with those technologies, or do we want them to be more prepared to deal with a rapidly changing technology environment? So I guess that goes back to the basic assumption of what we need to do to prepare them for the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does preparedness actually look like? And is it sort of specific skill sets, or is it that more sort of adaptable mindset?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. And there's a big difference, I think, when we're talking about validating our assumptions. One of the approaches that you can take is lots of research and analysis, because that's one of the ways of trying to validate these ideas or test these ideas is let's look at what other schools have brought in a STEM center before, and let's look at some of the research around what the key skills needed for the future might be. The challenge with that is that often when you focus just on research and not on action, you end up in this analysis paralysis mode where you can spend your entire life just sort of searching for more data and trying to get complete data before you make any decisions. And because we live in a complex world where you can never have complete data, it means that you end up never acting and never moving forward, and you sort of stagnate. So the idea behind prototyping, it should always be combined with research, and that's a really valuable approach. But the idea of prototyping is actually learning through action to sort of move you forward and get you into this forward momentum where you can start to actually make your ideas real in some way, put them in the hands of the users, whether that's the students by, creating a STEM club or building a model of what the center would look like and sort of talking students through it, or giving a presentation about STEM and sort of measuring student reactions and that sort of thing, to get that real world feedback and reactions and see whether you're on the right track in terms of the assumptions that you've made about student engagement with the center at least. Awesome. That is sadly all we have time for today, folks. I'll very quickly share with you just a sort of summing up our top 3 tips about your design assumptions and how to challenge them. The first one being, be excited to be wrong. When you're working in design and innovation contexts, identifying those assumptions and finding out that you're wrong about them is an awesome learning process, because it means that you're not going to spend a whole lot of time and energy solving the wrong problem or solving it in an unhelpful way. So being that, shifting that mindset about being wrong and about failure, and sort of to get really excited about sort of challenging wrong assumptions. Trying to involve people with direct experience as much as possible. So in this case, the teachers themselves, the students, people who are actually working or sort of feel like they were unprepared or might be prepared for the future of work or the world of work, and sort of getting them and their voices involved in the process rather than making assumptions on people's behalf is really valuable. And then prototyping and testing your ideas, as we've spoken about, to learn about them really quickly through action so that you don't get stuck in that analysis paralysis as well. We would love to see you guys at more of our workshops, and going forward, we've got lots of stuff coming up. I'll send through a feedback link straight after this, so we'd love to get your feedback on this workshop as well, to hear what you thought of it. But our website has got lots of the things that we've got coming up. And in particular, the big one that we've got coming up in May is our design jam. So if you're a design practitioner, if you're wanting to learn more about design and sort of take your practice to the next level, we would love to see you at the Design Jam Bootcamp. And I'll be sending out a bit of a discount code as part of the follow-up to this session as well. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been awesome to work with you. And I hope you feel a little bit more confident now about challenging your design assumptions. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.